Nick Kroll, actor, comedian, producer. Look at Nick Kroll.
Hi, guys.
Look at that picture. By the way, it's actually a great plot to a movie.
Yeah.
That a former legendary playground star comes back at 70. And who came up with it, by the way?
The script was written by a gentleman, Jay Longino, very funny dude. And I'm not sure if they brought it to him or how it happened.
I think they brought it to Kyrie.
Yes, I think the shorts, they did the shorts for Pepsi, and they went viral, huge success. And I think they brought Kyrie the idea of here's how we think we could do this movie, and he was on board. And then they started to put it all together. And it's such a great group of NBA legends. It's crazy.
June 29th it opens. Now, when you film this, here's what's really interesting. Kyrie had just been moved to Boston.
Yeah.
So you're on the set with all these NBA dudes. And were they asking Kyrie constantly, what up? Like, what was it like?
Yeah, it was. So I got there about a week after the trade went down. And Lil Rel Howery, who also stars in the movie, who I was in that scene with, has talked about literally being on set with Kyrie. His brother comes up to him, sort of whispers something in his ear. They finish the take. Kyrie runs off set to celebrate because the trade has gone through, celebrates, comes back, and then is like back into the scene. And it was the dancing scene. There's a very funny dancing sequence where all of them get to dance. I think it was just an excuse to get Shaq on the dance floor.
By the way, Shaq is a fascinating guy. So before we get to Shaq, because you got some stories on Shaq. So when the players were talking to Kyrie was happy with the move.
Yes, he was excited about it.
Did you get it? Did you glean any anti-LeBron feel to it?
No, to be honest with Kyrie, I got there in the middle of production. I gave him a little breathing room.
Yeah.
And no, I didn't sense any anti-LeBron stuff. I think he was just excited. Like, it's a guy who was like, clearly was looking to go somewhere new. And then ends up getting placed on one of the only true contenders that he could go to.
Oh, God, it literally worked perfectly for him.
It really did. And so I think I just talked to him. We were doing some press the other day, and I was just catching up with him a little bit because we're such dear friends. But he was just, it was just fascinating to talk to a dude who, gets traded to the Celtics, has a great year, then goes down, and then has to watch his team go through the playoffs.
That's weird.
And then have to go play the Cavs. And then I was kind of, I was like, you bummed not to be on a team with JR anymore? Which he did not. He avoided answering.
By the way, you're a Knick fan. You were at the Reggie Miller game.
Yes.
So you're a sports fan. What did you make of Shaq?
I mean, he's one of those guys he is literally larger than life. He literally is larger than life. Like, he feels like he's out of frame even when you're meeting him. He's so large. He looks like they took a regular person and put him in like 125% machine. Like they scaled him up. Like, because he's proportionally, he makes sense.
What do you mean?
Like Kevin Durant or like even LeBron, you look at them and they're like, they're crazy looking. I mean, they're not crazy looking. Long and big. But Shaq, everything is proportional. It's just like 125% of the size of a regular person. Like, he rolled up to set in a 4-door car with 2 seats in it. You know what I mean? It looks like he's in a 2-door coupe, but it's not. It's like just a regular 4-door Mercedes. And he's the nicest guy. I'm sure you've dealt with him.
No. He's a very unique guy.
He is. I think he's a guy who has been literally bigger than everyone his entire life. So every room he walks into, he puts everybody at ease.
He diffuses the, oh my God, how's the weather up there stuff.
Yes, and he's immediately puts everyone at ease. He's lovely. I got like a couple hours with him one night on set and just picked his brain. I mean, he's a super smart dude.
Yeah.
He wants to work constantly.
Yeah.
And you talk to him and he's like, he's kind of like, he was talking about like, he shoots the show for TNT. They do the general commercials in the studio, where they do the TNT, like, and he's just worked it all out, and he just loves to work and is such a nice dude. Reggie, I got to, because I was at that game, the Knicks game, when Reggie lit up the Knicks against Spike, with Spike Lee.
Oh God, yeah, that's an iconic. They've done 30 for 30s on that.
Yes, and I was at that game and so mad at Spike Lee for getting.
Because you're
Reggie.
a Knick fan.
I was a Knick fan growing up, and is anybody a Knick fan now?
It's hard to be.
It's so hard to be a Knicks fan right now.
Yeah.
I've ended up now, because after playing with Kyrie, I did play in the game with Kyrie. When I've started following the Knicks, the Celtics a lot more closely this year.
By the way, Kyrie, the world is flat. It kind of doesn't sit great with me. But other than that, he's just kind of a unique dude.
Yeah. I found him to be really bright, really smart, no on set, no like attitude, no ego. I mean, these guys were in makeup every day for 2-3 hours, and they never complained. They were on time every day. I really enjoyed him, and Kyrie's good in this movie. He's a good actor.
By the way, through the years, I've said this to people. I told you this during the break. Football players are the most mature early because they know their game has some violence.
Yeah.
Their careers are going to end. So football players get drafted. They buy a car. They buy a house. They buy their parents' houses. They get married.
Yeah.
And then at like 32, they leave. Whereas hockey guys are the big drinkers and partiers, very European, very Canadian.
Yes. Yeah.
They run the tap dry. Basketball players are the funniest by far because, first of all, a lot of them grew up gawky, 6'8" in 8th grade.
Yeah.
They've been teased. Girls wouldn't pay attention to them. Chris Webber you work with.
Yeah, Chris Webber is
funny. So
funny in this movie. He plays preacher.
What's that? What role is that?
He's like a Southern Baptist preacher character. I would do the voice, but I feel like I might get kicked off of television if I do it. But he's super funny in the movie. That was a real revelation. But for me, being with all of those guys, I grew up playing basketball right when the Fab Five were blowing up, and to be with Chris, and he's so funny. And Lisa Leslie is in the movie as well, and she was kind of the mom for everybody. And she's was watching her play, watching all those get on the court, and they all got competitive. Like, that doesn't shut off. You're messing around, you're shooting a movie, but as soon as we started playing, like, Lisa was like, I'm a scorer. Like, she heated up. She started hitting threes.
Oh God, yeah.
And then Reggie started missing threes, and I just was, because I'm the bad guy. I'm on the bench, and I'm like, it was a lifelong dream of me to be the white guy in an all-black movie, and so I got to just be yapping away at all those guys, and specifically Reggie, just wouldn't. And then he got hot, and I was like, oh, this is what Spike Lee felt like.
That's what.
Yeah.
By the way, you graduated Georgetown. What do you major in when you're a comedian?
I majored in history. I minored in
the least funny thing in the world.
I know. It was not. It was not. But I started doing improv there. I started doing comedy there, and met John Mulaney and a bunch of other really funny people who I still work with. In a way, it was like, for me, that was the thing I got most out of school, was the training for it. It was like, it's no different than playing for Kentucky. But
it is interesting because there is something to be. I'm Norm Macdonald.
Yeah,
I grew up. My favorite two comedians growing up were Gary Shandling. R.I.P.
Yes.
Oh my God. That was one of the days. Anthony Bourdain and Gary Shandling passed away, and I was sick for days.
Huge bummer, both of them.
And then Norm Macdonald, who's the crazy. I don't even know how his head works. Now, how do comedians see Norm Macdonald?
Oh, he's one of those, there's that phrase of like a comedian's comedian, and I would say Norm is up there as a guy who he's kind of thinking on a different plateau level, and I think people love him, and because some of his stuff is so dry that you're like, I think it might go through some audiences, or it's super mean. But he was a guy who I loved. I mean, when I started doing comedy, he was at SNL and he was doing Weekend. I mean, he was doing Weekend Update during all the OJ stuff.
Oh, good God, it was controversial.
Yeah.
And Don Ohlmeyer, I think, hated it.
Yeah, I think he fired him for it. But for us, he's one of those guys who's just deeply funny and so specific.
Do you buy this thing that comedians are all sad? Seinfeld doesn't seem sad to me. Leno doesn't seem sad.
Well, when you have your own building filled with vintage cars in New York, it might be harder to be sad. I don't know. Aren't we all kind of sad all the time?
No kidding.
Is that what we should get into on this show?
No kidding.
The underlying ennui of existence.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I don't think so. I mean, I think it really depends on the person. It's like, I think the truth is there is a certain perspective that you can have on things if you're a comedian that can be a little dark at times.
Yeah.
But look, I've hung out with waiters and valet attendants and billionaires, and everybody can figure out a way to be sad.
No kidding.
Nick
Kroll.
Is that the message I should leave here?
By the way, Facebook's made everybody miserable.
That is the problem. I do think social media, it's like you wake up to like a
feeling inferior.
Yes, feeling inferior and just being like, oh, wonderful, the detention centers and gas attacks. Oh, what a way to wake up. Nice way to wake up in the morning. Uncle Drew premieres in theaters June 29th.
Lionsgate. By the way, Lionsgate's great. They do a lot of good stuff.
They do. Honestly, and so this is what I will say to pivot. This movie for me was like, it was so fun to make. For me, it was a dream to be in a movie with NBA guys. I got to play defense against Kyrie.
Okay, let's talk. I want to show some tape.
Yeah.
Now, how tall are you, Nick?
I'm, I would say, somewhere between 5'9", 5'10".
And you have twitch muscles? Are you an athlete?
I was, they were like, you're going to play in the game. And I was like, all right, well, look, I don't know if I could make it in the NBA, but I was pretty good on my Jewish day school basketball team.
Yeah.
In middle school. And so I got out there on the court and played. I went up for a layup, and Kyrie tried to block it, and he missed it.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was like, I had a feeling. You know what I mean? I was like, I know I ended up in comedy, but road less traveled, could have gone either way. And so then I'm real cocky, and I'm like, that's right, Kyrie. I'm in character. And I'm like, I started kind of going at him, and I was like, I want to D him up. So I decided I'm wearing rings, and I slap the ground to get low, play defense, and I'm wearing rings, and I'm like, oh no, my fingers hurt. And then I got low to play D against Kyrie, and I guess I don't want to ruin the movie, but he did manage to get past me.
Yeah.
But I didn't fall down. You know what I mean? And I take that as a victory.
I would say this, as somebody who's a performer, even in all that makeup, it's kind of remarkable how great basketball players are.
It's unbelievable.
It's hard to explain to the public.
Yeah.
That I'll tell you an old story. Can I tell you this? You don't even know who Gus Williams was. He went to USC.
Uh-huh.
He was a Seattle Sonic back in the 70s.
Sure.
So I was a young kid watching TV. I'm watching the local news, KOMO in Seattle. And Harry Sloan is a sportscaster. Mm-hmm. And the Sonics were really good, and Gus Williams was their best player. And I watched all the games. And I always thought, I was kind of athletic, quarterback high school. I was like, yeah. The minute I knew, I'm just common. The late Harry Sloan is doing a report, and it's at Sonic practice. They're behind him. And Gus Williams comes into frame, not knowing he's on TV, as he's doing what they call a stand-up.
Yeah.
The ball's on the floor. Gus is 6'1". He grabs the ball effortlessly and does a 360, dunks it in practice. And I'm like, what was that?
Yeah.
Like, when you go to a practice and guys are screwing around and they're not afraid of missing a dunk, so they try stuff with you at Rucker Park or stuff. Kyrie, within 2 seconds, probably did something.
It's crazy. So he worked me. He worked me, and it was. But for me, it was like a lifelong dream that I got to get worked by the guy with the best handle in the game,
best finisher in the game.
And watching him. That's the thing is, you watch him finish, and like he puts crazy spins on his like layups, because he's taking crazy angles towards the hoop and going high off the backboard, and it was amazing to watch. Then watch Lisa Leslie and watch these other guys watching him and watching him give them tips about how he was doing stuff, because he's doing stuff that they weren't doing when they were playing.
It's Picasso and Monet's like, wow, that's interesting.
It was fascinating. And they're really and it was after the trade, and they were all sort of talking to him about how do you go to a new team? How do you take that team over? In an interesting way. They were all kind of, it was like for me to be able to just have a small little moment of a view into what it was like. And Nate Robinson's also in the movie, who's so funny. I mean, he barely says anything in the movie and kills. And watching him play,
he's got a Kevin Hart quality to him.
He is. I mean, he's tiny. He's maybe 5'10", maybe.
Oh, I think 5'8" and a half.
And he dunked over Shaq. Not like dunked on Shaq, he dunked over Shaq. Like Shaq was standing below the rim and he didn't know what was happening, and Nate Robinson just jumped and dunked over him. It was bananas. And I think Nate's trying to get back in the league, and watching them help him. He went off to go have a workout with a couple teams, and he's, I mean, Nate is ripped.
He played football at the University of Washington. Yeah. He was a corner.
You see him and it makes sense. So funny. He is so funny. And it was just, I don't know, man. For me, to be able to be if you told me, if current me went to my 13-year-old self and said, you're going to go play basketball with a bunch of NBA guys, my 13-year-old self would be like, hey man, I'm not supposed to talk to a strange man. But but then once I got through that, it was just like a kind of a dream come true for me. It was like a fantasy. Truly.
Well, this has been great for us. Nick Kroll, it's Uncle Drew. It opens June 29th. And by the way, go to YouTube. And just if you've never heard Nick before or watched him before, because I love comedy, so I go home and literally this is what I do. Go to YouTube, look up John Mulaney, Nick Kroll Spirit Awards. Thank me later. Sit there for an hour, watch it over and over. It's as brilliant as anything in comedy on the internet. This has been a total pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. Big fan of the show.
Uncle Drew, Lionsgate, June 29th. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.